Hello everyone, welcome to Come Sit at My Table. We're Tom and Melissa, and we're really happy that you've come by today to sit at our table. We are going to make homemade bread today, and there's a reason for that. If you've been watching, you know that Melissa and I just got home from a little vacation in Florida, and when we got home, we had almost no food in the house. So we ran to our local Mennonite store and got a loaf of homemade sourdough bread, and it was delicious. But it kind of dawned on me that instead of paying $5 a loaf for their bread, I could just make our own. Now, Melissa and I used to make bread quite often. We loved to keep homemade bread in our house, but we've just kind of gotten out of the habit of it. So today we're going to make a couple of loaves of homemade bread. One we will go ahead and use because we've about used up the loaf we have from the Mennonite store. The other one I will freeze. And yes, you can freeze homemade bread. All right, let's talk about what we're going to use today to make homemade bread. It is so simple and so few ingredients, you're not going to believe it. First, we're going to use 2 cups of warm water. Now, if you're looking in here saying, wait a minute, I don't see any water, you're right. It's not invisible water. I have not gotten it yet because it has to be warm to put our yeast and sugar in. So I have not gotten it in the measuring cup yet, but I will in just a minute. And when we say warm water, we mean water that is about the temperature of water that you would use for a baby's bath. If you have water that's too cool, it will not activate your yeast. If you have water that's too hot, it will kill the yeast. So you just need warm water. And the best way to gauge it is to just put your finger in it and see if it's about the right temperature. It should be about the temperature of whatever water you would put a baby in to give it a bath. Now, if you need to measure it, if you need to use a thermometer to check it, you can do that. And it should be between 100 and 110 degrees, somewhere in there. If it's off 1 or 2 degrees, it's not going to hurt. But you don't want cold or even cool water or hot water. So 2 cups of water. We're going to use 2/3 cup of sugar. And we're going to use 1.5 tablespoons of active dry yeast. Now let's stop here and talk about the yeast. A lot of people buy their yeast in packets. And I've done that for years. Sometimes I still do it. But when you're making bread, almost all bread recipes measure out the yeast by tablespoons or teaspoons. The reason for that is that packets of yeast can vary quite a bit in the amount of yeast in the packet. So if you say 2 packs of yeast, you may not get exactly the same amount of yeast every time you open 2 packets. It really is better to measure it out. Even if you use the packets, you kind of need to pour it out and measure it to make sure you have the right amount. So we need 1.5 tablespoons. If you have just a hair more, that's not going to hurt anything. But I find the easiest way to do it is just to buy the jars and measure it out. Okay. The next thing we're going to use is 1/4 cup of oil, and I'm using canola oil. Then we're going to use 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and we will put that in our flour. And we're using 6 cups of bread flour. Now, it's not necessary to use bread flour, but I like it best when I'm making bread. Honestly, the only time I ever use bread flour is when I'm making homemade bread. But I do think there's just a little bit of a difference between using it and all-purpose flour.
Any other kind of salt you can use besides what we call table salt?
Yeah, you can use any kind of salt. That's just what we keep in our house. And I know there are people that don't like it, but it's worked fine for us. You can use sea salt. You can use pink Himalayan salt, whatever. But this works for us. Okay. one thing I wanted to tell you was that you don't want to put your salt in with your yeast. I've always been told, and I have found from experimenting with baking, that if you put salt into your yeast, it can kill the yeast. It may not always do it, but it certainly can do it, and it has done it when I've been baking before. If you take the salt and stir it or just whisk it into your flour, it does not do that. Now, I guess that's because it's in with the flour and the crystals are coated with the flour. I don't know. I don't know the science behind it. But I do know that if you put the salt directly into your yeast mixture, the yeast, the water, and the sugar mixture, it can kill your yeast. So add your salt into the flour and just stir it in. All right, let's start by getting our 2 cups of warm water. And we do want it to be just warm. And of course, this is cold. So we're going to have to let it run for a second until it gets warm. Okay, here it comes. It's warming up. So and I'm going to keep my finger in it because I want to make sure it doesn't get too warm. Actually, that might have been just a hair cold. There we go. Okay. So let's make sure we have 2 cups, and I'm over just a hair. So let's pour just a little bit out. Let me check it. Still over just a hair. That's pretty close. Okay. So let's check it. That's pretty good and warm. So we're going to add 2/3 cup of sugar. And I like to add it to the water before the yeast and stir it up to get it started dissolving, because your yeast is going to feed off that sugar. If that sugar is just laying in the bottom and none of it has dissolved, then you're not going to get your yeast to activate fully. It would still activate some, but not like it should if that sugar's not dissolved in that water. Okay, so we've stirred it up. That sugar should be dissolved in there for the most part. Now, let's add our 1.5 tablespoons of yeast. There's 1. And there's another 1/2. And then we're just going to whisk that in also. Just stir it in, get that mixed in there so it can start to activate, start to feed. Oh, I can already smell that yeast. We'll let it start feeding on that sugar. And I'm just going to take this cover that I'm going to use for our bread dough to rise, and I'm just going to cover that while it's activating.
And why are you covering it?
Just, I don't know. You don't have to do that. I just always do it. I cover it up and let it hang out. Okay, so that has to sit for probably 5 to 10 minutes until that yeast starts to activate. You will know the yeast has activated when it gets foamy and bubbly on top. You'll see like I don't really know how to describe it. You know when you pour a Coke from a bottle or can into a glass and it gets the foam on top of it? It's kind of like that, but it's a little bit thicker. But you will notice that there's definitely a foam. There's a difference. You'll see where it has kind of activated. And sometimes you can even see it kind of bubble. You'll see bubbles come up. So we're going to let that sit for 5 to 10 minutes. As soon as it's activated, we will come back and we'll add everything else and get our bread dough made.
If it doesn't bubble, does that mean your yeast is bad?
Absolutely. If it does not activate, if it doesn't foam up, you know your yeast is not working. You have to start over with better yeast. By the way, it is important to check the date on your yeast. Make sure your yeast is not out of date. Normally, what I've always read is that you need to use up your yeast within 6 months of opening the seal on the jar, or at least by the expiration date on the bottle or on the packet. So make sure you check those to make sure that your yeast is good. And if it doesn't foam, if it doesn't activate and get bubbly, you have to start over. Your bread won't rise if your yeast is not alive. So make sure you check that to make sure it has foamed up. Okay, we'll let that activate, and when it's ready, we'll be back and add everything else and make our bread dough. We'll be back in just a minute. It's been about 6 minutes, maybe 7 minutes since we stirred in the sugar and yeast to the warm water, and you can clearly see the layer of foam where the yeast has activated, and it is covered with bubbles on top. So we know that our yeast is alive and it's working, and our bread dough should rise really well. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, now that we're to this stage, is that I'm going to add my salt to my flour. So I'm going to just put 1.5 teaspoons in my flour. And I'm just going to take a fork and kind of fluff that up, stir that in together. I want to make sure that I get that salt down in there mixed in with that flour so it does not come in contact by itself with my yeast mixture. Okay. Now I know some people may say, well, that's kind of silly, but I'm telling you, I've done it both ways, and salt can kill yeast. I've seen it happen.
Sift it together too.
You could, if you want to sift it, you could do that, but that's easier. Okay, now I'm going to move my salt. All I need now is my yeast mixture, my flour, and my oil. So I'm going to move my mixer around so Melissa can get in here and see what we're doing. And I can hear now somebody saying, do I have to have a mixer? Absolutely not. You can do this by hand. It is easy to do by hand. It takes a little elbow grease if that's what you're going to do. Let me grab a spatula because I want to make sure I get all that yeast out there. It will take a little elbow grease if you do it by hand, but you can do that. If you have let's see, what is this thing called, Melissa? This thing right here. If you have one of these, I think I got this from Amazon. It's to do bread dough with. If you have one of those, you can do it by hand with this, and it's really easy to do. But if you've got a mixer with a dough hook on it, why not use it?
And you don't know what that utensil's called?
Oh.
I'll give you a minute. It'll come to you.
It might. It might not.
It could be in the middle of the night when it comes to you, but I have no doubt that it'll come to you eventually.
She knows me.
Just don't wake me up and tell me if it's like 2 in the morning, okay?
No promises. Okay, I'm going to get my 1/4 cup of oil, and I want you to see that I'm not just pouring it down in there. I'm literally going to pour it down the side of my bowl. I don't want to pour it right on top of my yeast mixture. So I poured it right down the side of the bowl. Put that in the sink and get rid of my oil. Now.
So you're really having to baby the oil, or the yeast, right?
I do. I mean, the whole bread, success of the bread depends on that yeast. So I'm going to put my dough hook on. We will start our... Saved it.
Good save, babe. Good save.
I guess I should have put the dough hook on before I did this, right?
Right.
Okay. Now let's put the shield on. Hey, listen. This is a real kitchen. I'm a home cook.
We are not professionals.
Things happen.
I have said that many times.
Okay. So we're going to turn our hook on low. And I'm just going to start putting it in. You want to put about a cup at a time. Something like that. Just, a few spoonfuls. Just let it go down in there. Start to work. And it's going to take a little while because you just have to let it run, let it keep working. I'll just keep adding a few spoonfuls at a time until it's all in there. You can see how it's starting to get thick. It's almost like a paste consistency. And of course, the more we add, the thicker it's going to get. I really like this chute, this pie or mixer shield with the chute on the side, because it really helps to get ingredients like this down in there without spilling them. Well, usually. I have a talent for spilling things.
We are capable though, aren't we?
We are. By the way, this recipe is called Amish white bread. And I guess it's an Amish recipe. It is so simple with 6 ingredients, and that's it. You can't get much more simple than that, especially when 2 of the ingredients are water and salt.
Do you remember getting it? It just seems like we've always had it.
I've had this for probably 40 years or more. Couldn't even tell you how many times I've used this. It is locked. Yeah, it's locked. And you just have to let it run. Just let it do its work.
And how long will this take?
It'll take a little while. I don't know how many minutes, but it'll take just a little while. Okay, and get all that flour down in there. And some on the counter, because if you're not making a mess, you're not doing it right. Okay, I can take that off now. Okay, I'm going to stop it, remove this part of the shield, and just check my dough.
What are you checking it for?
To see if it's sticky. It's not. You can see it's not sticking to me at all.
And if it were, what would you do?
Well, that would mean it's going to need a little more flour. Okay. And if it's too dry, then you might have to add just a hair more water. But that looks pretty good. You want to make sure it picks up all that flour and stuff off the bottom.
It's crazy that it already smells like bread.
Oh, it does, doesn't it? It smells delicious. Now, okay. The next thing we have to do is knead the bread. Not N-E-E-D. Of course, we always need bread. But this is K-N-E-A-D. And what we're going to do is put, and you don't have to have one of these mats. If you want to just do it on your countertop, you can. If you do that, though, just make sure that you've scrubbed it really well, that it's good and clean. But, you know, you can just put a little flour down. And then bring your, there we go. Bring your dough over and dump it out. Now, if there's anything in the bottom, you just scrape it out of there. And now we're just going to start working this together. And we're just going to fold and push. Fold and push.
Also known as kneading.
Kneading. K-N-E-A-D-I-N-G. If you wanted to just leave it in your mixer and let it work, you can. But it's really fun to do this part. Okay, I'm going to keep doing this for a minute, and then we will come back and show you us dividing it and putting it into the bread pan. We'll be back in just a minute. I have kneaded the dough and formed it into a ball. You can see there that I've just kind of pulled it in on itself. Now we're going to oil our large bowl. And I always use this old yellow Tupperware bowl because that's what my mom used when I was a kid. I don't know when she got this, but I don't remember her not having it. Well, my dad used it too. So that's what I use. So we just put a little oil in it, put our dough in upside down, and then flip it over. That way it's oiled on top and on the bottom. And we're going to cover it. And I'm going to use this same cover. We're just going to cover it up, and I'm going to stick it in the oven with the light on. Now, I did not turn the oven on. The heat is not on in the oven. The only thing on is the light bulb. The light bulb will give off enough heat to help this rise. So we're going to put it in for about an hour, and then we'll check it. It should have about doubled in size. And when it has risen, it's growing, it's about doubled in size, we will take it out of the oven, bring it back out, and get ready to put it in our loaf pans. By the way, you are going to need 2 loaf pans of some sort. This makes 2 loaves of bread. Okay, let's get this in the oven with just the light bulb on, and we'll be back in about an hour when it has risen. Our dough has been in the oven rising for just about 1 hour. I think actually an hour and 2 minutes. So we're going to take it out and see if it has doubled in size. And I can tell you that it smells wonderful. You can smell it all over our house. So let's take the cover off. Oh, wow. That looks so good.
It smells good. I
Now,
haven't baked it at all yet.
I know. You want a bite of it now?
No, I think I'll pass.
Okay, that's what I thought. We have a few things to do. First, we need to oil our pans. We are not going to butter them because we know that butter burns. So we're going to put just a little bit of oil in each pan, and we're going to oil those. Now, if you have so much in here that it's puddled, then all you have to do is just pour it out. But you want to make sure that the sides are oiled and the bottom is oiled. And we're not going to flour these. We're just going to oil them. Okay, so we got one oiled. Let's set it aside. I don't think this one has quite enough in it. Let me put just a drop more. Okay, and I might have to pour a little of that out. I might have too much now, but I want to make sure it's well oiled. All right. So we have that side. Let's do this one. And this side. Well, I don't think we're going to have a whole lot left in there. And this side. Okay. So our 2 pans are oiled. And now the next thing we're going to do is punch down our dough. And when people say punch, you think about punching something, but really it just means, I wish I had you see that. Look at these air bubbles in here. Can you see those? Mm-hmm. Did you hear that?
I hear them popping.
I don't know if everybody could hear that on camera, but you can hear the air come out of it. And you're just going to punch that down. Then we're going to take it out of our bowl and we're going to knead it for just a minute. Maybe not even that long. We just want to knead it a little bit. Get that gluten activated, I guess. Okay. Then we're going to divide it in half. If I can find my bench scraper. There it is. In this drawer with all of our things in it. And I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. Divide it in half. And then I'm going to start shaping it into a loaf. Just going to kind of press it out into a loaf shape. I'm going to fold those ends under. And I can even roll it some if I need to. You just want it to be in a loaf shape before you put it in your bread pan.
Will you need it anymore?
No, this is it. It's going in to rise for the last time, and then we'll bake it. So we've left our light bulb on in our oven because we want that heat just from the light bulb to remain in there. And we're just going to kind of form that into a loaf and put it into our pan. Okay, and we'll do the same thing with this one. Just start working it, and you can see that I'm just kind of pulling and stretching under as we go. And I'll do the same thing on the ends. Just pushing under and forming it into a loaf shape. Now, we want to tuck this end under. You can see that's kind of loose there. So we just want to work that in. Knead that a little bit. I may just knead this one. This one's not behaving very well. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Hang on, Melissa. I'm going to grab my rolling pin. I think I'm going to roll it out. It doesn't want to fold under very well. So I'm just going to roll it. Get it into a kind of a rectangle. Fold that under a little. Turn it. And then I'm just going to roll it up. That looks good. Okay. And we're going to put that, take that end under and that end. And we're going right into the pan. Form it into a loaf. And we're going to cover these and let them rise. I still hear air coming out of there. We're going to let those rise for at least 30 minutes. Maybe as long as another hour, but we will have to watch them. When they've risen about an inch above the pan, we want to bake them. So we'll watch them. When they've risen to that point, we'll take them out of the oven, turn the oven on to preheat it to 350, and then we'll put them back in to bake. So let's get these into the oven. We'll cover them. I'll probably just put a cloth, like a dishcloth over them, and let them rise for 30 minutes to an hour, and then we'll be back and let you see them. We'll be right back. The bread has been in the oven rising for right at 30 minutes, so let's take it out and see how it looks. That looks pretty good. So let's heat our oven. We are going to preheat it to 350 degrees. Now, we have to let our oven completely heat to 350 before we can put these back in. So we'll just let these sit right here until the oven's heated, and then we'll put those in. We're going to let them bake, and when they are finished baking, then we'll bring you back to see what they look like, and we may even slice a piece. And while I'm thinking about it, it's not 2 a.m. like Melissa said, but I did remember this is called a Danish dough whisk. So if you want one of these, you can probably find them on Amazon. Danish dough whisk. And I don't even have to wake her up at 2 a.m. to tell her. All right, so we're going to leave these set here until the oven gets preheated. Then we're going to stick those in and let them bake, and then we'll come back and let you see the bread. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Our bread baked for exactly 30 minutes. We took it out of the oven, removed them from the loaf pans, and we have allowed them to cool slightly on this cooling rack. Now, they are still warm. And even though we should let them cool completely before we cut them, we just can't wait. We need a piece of bread. So, I think we'll cut this one. Yeah, N-E-E-D, need a piece of bread. So, let's cut it. Move that one out of the way. Do you want to eat the end,
sure,
the heel, or do you want to take a slice out of the middle?
Oh, the heel's fine.
Okay. I love the heel.
Kind of crunchy.
It is. I like to use the heel of the bread to make toast. Can you see it? Looks really good, doesn't it? Oh, it's still a little warm. Oh, yeah, that butter's melting into there. Yum. I'm telling you, nothing, in my opinion, makes our house smell better than bread that's baking in the oven or right out of the oven. All right, babe, you taking the first bite?
Okay.
All right, here we go. Princess bite? Not really.
Big bite.
That was a big bite.
Oh, a big bite.
That was a bigger bite. Wow. That is delicious. I have to have one more.
It will be great toast.
It's going to be wonderful toast tomorrow morning. It'll also make great sandwiches. Really good sandwiches. And you know what else? I was thinking it'd be really good for bread pudding. Here, let me hold this up where you can see the inside of it. That is such pretty bread. All right, thank you for watching our video. We would appreciate it if you'd go right below the video and click that thumbs up. That just says you like the video. If you've not already, the best thing you can do for us is click that subscribe button, the little notification bell beside of it, and the word all. That just subscribes you to our channel. It's totally free. Remember that under the video where you see the title of this recipe, it'll say Amish white bread. If you'll click that, that description box will expand, and Melissa always puts the written recipe in that box for you so you have it written out already. And under that is our contact information. And of course, below that is a place where you can leave a comment if you'd like to do that. We really do enjoy reading the comments. Okay, thank you so much for watching.
Don't forget to tell them we're having a new series starting.
Oh, that's right. On Sunday, we are starting a new series that we are calling Subscriber Sunday. And we're going to use recipes on Sunday that subscribers have sent in to us. So Sunday will be the first subscriber recipe. And we're going to do it for a while, maybe a couple of months or more. We'll see how long it goes. But we've gotten some really good recipes from subscribers. If you have a recipe that you absolutely love, something that you've made and is wonderful and your family and friends love, we would love to use it on our channel if you would share it with us. So you can get our contact information in that description box right below the video. All right. Thank you again for watching. Please remember, you are always welcome to come sit at my table. Have a great day.